Hello, and welcome to Fifi and the In-Between, the channel for original short stories of fantasy to occupy your mind and inspire your deepest self. This is the story, The Keeper of Bottles. Evergrove was cloaked in a somber stillness as the townsfolk gathered at the old stone church. The day was gray, with clouds hanging low in the sky, echoing the hearts of those who had come to mourn Manifa, a girl who had vanished nearly a year ago. Whispers of loss filled the thick, moist air, crowded with shadows and vapors. Amidst the sorrow, a figure appeared at the edge of town, weary and worn. The mourners were caught up in their unwilling acceptance of grief, the acceptance that she would never return, and that her body would never be found. Some wanted to keep hoping, to keep looking. But the shoes and the hair bow with a clump of hair found at the edge of town promised a sad story no one really wanted to face. The figure drew nearer to the church, which was surrounded by a rusty, heavy cast iron gate. The slight drag of an injured leg and the hair hiding the eyes of the stranger slowly gained the attention of the townspeople, who already had a healthy fear of ghosts and maleficent spirits. Whoever this was looked closer to death than life. Arya, Manifa's childhood friend, felt a strange sickness in her stomach when she saw the human creature wrap its hands around the gate. In times of mourning, sufferers are vulnerable to dark forces. The darkness hungers for those who are weak and tired. She froze, watching. Sure, it was staring at her, hunting her. It pulled on the gate, which grated and squealed, announcing to everyone that there was an uninvited guest in their midst. In all of the stories, the dark forces never dared to enter the church grounds, and so they stood, frozen in terror, lumps in their throats, wanting to run, but not wanting to be seen by the beast. It moved slowly towards Arya, sensing her terror. Arya raised her lantern to face her fate with a steady heart, although her legs trembled, when the soft orange light exposed the figure's face. It looked vaguely like Manifa, but something was very off. Her body might have come to seek vengeance for its death. Such things were said to happen. "Manifa," she whispered out, her voice cracked and dry. The crowd watched, muscles tense, distrust etched on their faces. And Manifa, with sunken cheeks and haunted, fish-gray eyes, nodded slowly. "It's me," she said with a flat mouth. Manifa had not come home to celebrate her life she had lost, but to escape from the depths of something worse. She reached out a thin hand and opened her fingers. In her palm were shards of glass, and from them blood dripped. Arya's mind fixated on the hand. The dead could not bleed. Arya reached into her wool shirt pocket and pulled out a piece of cloth, stained with sickness of the past, clean, but thick with visible memories. She called to her brother. "Finn, don't say a word, just do as I ask." Finn was older than Arya, but studious and frail. He feared the alley cats and sparks from a fire. However, Finn was always afraid to say no to his bold and short-tempered sister. She felt his presence as he stepped behind her. "Hold the lantern right here. Be still and steady." He reached toward the lantern and replaced her grip. He was shaking, but he was relieved that she did not glare at him for his weakness. She reached out with her free hand, afraid that her friend's skin would be cold and stiff. But as she touched it, She was surprised at its soft warmth. Holding the hand gently, she used the cloth to slowly remove the sharp shards reflecting the golden light. From all around, Manifa's old friends cautiously stepped forward in awe and disbelief. Manifa felt the fearful glares of the people she no longer seemed to know. As their eyes slowly relaxed and Arya removed the last and deepest cut of glass, she sensed the weight of expectation from those around her. No one was prepared for whatever story led to Manifa's return. Manifa knew that someone had died. She had been to too many funerals when a sickness had passed through years before. She looked to where fresh soil had been dug up in the night, preparing for the dead. She slowly approached the grave and peered down inside. A box. White pine. Rough and crudely made. It is how they make boxes for the dead when there is no body to protect. Around her, not a sound was made. Nobody dared to move. And on the box, she saw written her name and the prayer of the dead. She closed her eyes with what little energy she had, recognized that she had arrived at her own funeral. The town had done its best, she knew. She did not know how long she had been gone, but it felt like a lifetime. She had been missing long enough for the church to declare her death final and certain. Manifa turned back to face the crowd. She walked through them as though they were ghosts, and walked up the 4 church steps to the open doors. Eyes watched her. Lanterns flickered. And she, as thin as a rumor, a ripped sweater hanging off her like a sail on a shipwreck, stood motionless, looking at the hand-carved cross. She had been 15 the last time she had seen it. "Sorry," she croaked, hoarse, dry, as she suddenly collapsed to the ground. The gasps and cries that followed could have been bottled and sold to sorcerers. They were so raw and painful. Manifa's father ran to the fallen form and touched her face with both hands, pressing gently with disbelief as if he expected her to fade. "You're warm," he whispered. "No," she replied, barely conscious. "I'm cold, very cold." Arya arrived quickly behind the father, with Finn and the rest of the town in tow. Together, they gathered the painfully light and terribly warm girl who had arrived at her own funeral, and they carried her home. Manifa was returned to her home, where her room had been frozen in time, awaiting her return. Her boots still lay where she had kicked them off the day before she went missing. While Manifa's father, Hanno, was deeply caring, he was not emotionally strong, and even small challenges tired him out quickly. And this was no small event. Arya and Finn sat next to Manifa's bed. They were tentative, like stray cats circling a familiar doorstep. Slowly, Manifa's fever came down, and her awareness of the people around her improved. After several quiet days, she was able to speak, and her color returned. The brown of her skin returned to its amber hue, no longer matching the gray outside, which had still not lifted. "You look more like yourself," Arya said, as she handed Manifa a cup of tea to help her soften her throat. She smiled lightly. "Thank you." Over the next few days, Manifa struggled to adjust. The siblings brought her meals, shared stories of the town gossip since her absence, and gently encouraged her to talk about her experiences. Hanno, feeling more hopeful, also became more demanding. "Where were you?" he asked, holding her hand too tightly. Manifa would sink deeper into the bed and look away. She was haunted by nightmares and did not want to talk about the missing time. Each night, she woke gasping, visions swirling in her mind. Memories of isolation and despair plagued her, making it hard to face the world. How could they possibly understand? It was better that they not know than to not believe. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Arya found her staring out of her bedroom window, lost in thought. Manifa, you can talk to us, she said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. We want to help. I want to, she replied, tears brimming in her eyes, but I don't know how. Realizing that they needed a different approach, Arya and Finn organized a gathering at the Willow Pond, where they had spent countless afternoons together. It was just the three of them, hoping for a safe space for Manifa to share her story. As the friends settled beneath the sprawling branches, Finn felt nervous. Arya stood beside her, a comforting presence. We are all here for you, she said, encouraging their friend to speak. Taking a deep breath, she began to recount her experiences. I was bottled. The siblings blinked, waiting for more. Bottled? Finn said, his tone skeptical. Arya shot him a furious glance. Like, whiskey, she explained. Aged, stored. I was watching the world through a glass barrier, and then spilled. She spoke of the creature that had tormented her, whispering her fears and regrets, feeding off of her memories. The friends listened intently, at times nodding and understanding, and at other times holding back tears. As she shared her story, Manifa felt some of the weight lift from her shoulders. But there were other, more difficult pieces that she could not bear to utter out loud. She was afraid it would break her. She could not speak about how she ended up deep in the woods, no shoes, hair torn from her head. But she did explain how the forest is hiding a door. It is as if they are luring the young and curious, but not the bold and experienced. The handle is simple brass. The wood is old, like a fence post after many seasons. She hoped the door would take her somewhere safe, somewhere she could hide. She was surprised to find the door unlocked, and as she cautiously peered in, she heard footsteps behind her, and she took the risk, closing the door and preparing to guide herself as quickly as possible through the black underground. But as soon as the door closed, a single bulb lit up the room below. She tiptoed down the stairs, not sure who or what she might find. There she saw shelves lining the walls, heavy with bottles, hundreds of bottles, thousands of bottles, glass of every color, every shape. Inside some, shadows pressed against the sides, and others, soft glow pulsed as if a heartbeat was filled with light. She caught a movement from the corner of her eye and froze. Slowly, looking towards the source of the movement, her heart raced, hoping for relief, but ready to fight. And at the far end of the cellar stood a man. He wore a suit that once might have been called elegant. His hair was silver, his eyes cold and appraising. Ah, he said. Finally. Excuse me? Manifa asked. You are perfectly timed. The keeper, the collector of what might be, the judge of what should age and what should be poured out. I am stronger than I look. I will hurt you, she told him. She grabbed one of the bottles and prepared to shatter it against the wall. But with impressive speed, he grabbed her hand and stopped her. I wouldn't do that, he said, and he grabbed her neck with the other hand. She felt her body go numb, and he held her throat tightly until the room went black. When she came to, she was inside a bottle. She did not understand how she got there, but surrounding her she could see the others, but they appeared frozen in time. For her, time stretched and shrank unpredictably. She could hear other bottles, a girl sobbing softly in the green glass, an old man humming in the blue. They were all aging, all waiting. And she was learning what it felt like to hold anger, regret, and loneliness all at once, pressed against glass walls, tasting them in every single breath. Was it days? Weeks? Years? Who can say? Time and glass is unlike anything she could explain. But finally the keeper came. He lifted her bottle, and the cork was removed. Air rushed in, light crashed in. She was spilled onto the stone floor of the cellar. He looked at her, with his nose twitching in disgust. "You have not aged well," he said. She tried to argue. She tried to fight. But she was too tired. The air hurt. Her body hurt. And yet, somehow she survived. "But how did you get back?" asked Finn. "I walked. I didn't know the way. The world felt fake, like an illusion. Everything seemed mixed up. Even the shadows were too bright and too loud. There were elk. They stared. Birds were silent. Flies hovered, I think, waiting for me to die. And then I came to the edge of town. I didn't even recognize it. I just felt drawn to something. And then everything about my life came rushing back once the glass was removed. And it hit me so hard, it was like a star fell from the sky and crashed into my brain. I felt so bent and twisted." After some silence, to take in everything, Arya cleared her throat. "You looked like a ghost. Your foot was dragging, and your eyes were black. I don't understand what that man did to you, but you were someone else." Arya could tell there was a lot Manetha was holding back. It was this crowded look in her eyes. One step at a time. "I knew you were there during the fever. I could feel you pressing the cool cloths to my forehead, and I could feel you holding my hand," Manetha said, with a grateful tear falling down her cheek. The first tears since coming back. Manetha began to feel lighter, more herself. However, she jumped easily, and the nightmares still chased her like a shadow lurking in the corners of her mind. The keeper that had trapped her hadn't truly let her go. She could feel the keeper's presence, watching from the darkness, waiting for a moment when she would be ripe enough to pluck and bottle for a better flavor. One sunny day, full of bees and poppies, Manetha shared this nagging feeling that the keeper was still watching her. They decided to visit Old Lady Morgana in the forest. She knew all the lore of the village, and through her stories, they hoped they might find a clue as to what the keeper really is and how to find him or stop him. Morgana did not share her talents for free. She would send them on a quest, no doubt. When they arrived at her house, which was covered in animal skulls she collected, she was sitting on the stoop, waiting for them. She could hear everything, and it was impossible to catch her unawares. "Stop," she demanded. The group of friends stopped suddenly. "We bring chamomile and sweetgrass and pressed apricot seed oil. We know how much you love gifts from nature," Arya said, pretending to be braver than she felt. "I don't need your gifts, but I will take them," Morgana said in a huff as she began approaching them. "The stories you look for are forbidden to tell," she said knowingly. She snatched the basket of goods. The friends felt their hearts sink. They knew more coaxing would only vex the aging witch. They started turning around when they heard Morgana call out from her stoop, "But they never said anything about reading being forbidden." Arya wanted to shout and hug the grumpy, lonely woman. But if Morgana hated anything, it was youthful energy. Better to say nothing. The witch never let anyone in her house. It is said that if you go in, the house will swallow you, and you will live in its stomach eternally. This knowledge was imparted to every child so often and from such a young age that they all knew not to go past the stoop. From inside, she began throwing books out through the doorway. One hit Finn square in the chest. It fell to the ground as he groaned in pain. Sure, he had broken a rib. Morgana slammed the door shut, no longer wanting to deal with unwelcome visitors. They soaked in as much information as they could before the sun began setting, and they would soon run out of light to make it home. They stacked the books on the stoop and raced home, unwilling to be caught in the woods with the keeper. They had discovered that there were old legends that spoke of a being that thrived on fear and isolation. There was no method written that could destroy the keeper. Like an ant, he had many tunnels and chambers to hide in. However, it was possible to seal the door. Walking back home, they began formulating a plan. Tomorrow, we will gather what we need and then we will seal the door for good, Arya said, not giving much room for disagreement. Finn's hands trembled. I don't know if I can. You don't have to, she said. We will be there. And whatever waits, whatever's behind that door, we will deal with it. She knew Finn would only be a liability in a dangerous situation, and she didn't want to deal with trying to save him along the way. Manisa looked grateful. I'm so glad I don't have to do this alone, she said with relief, and she took a deep breath in, feeling safer than she had in a long time. Throughout the next day, they gathered their materials, keeping their mission and knowledge secret. They tried to seem whimsical and flippant in case the keeper's eyes were watching. Finn helped pack their travel sacks, tears falling silently. It's important that someone stays behind, Arya reassured him, just in case something goes wrong. That night, Manisa dreamed. In her dreams, she found a shimmering pool that reflected all the terrible memories. As she gazed into the water, the keeper materialized, a shadowy figure that embodied every fear and every regret. You thought you could escape me, little one? The keeper hissed, his voice echoing in the stillness. She woke as if surfacing from deep water, gasping for air. For a moment, she did not remember the funeral or the willow pond or the mission. The room tilted. Arya was in the chair by Manifa's window, asleep but upright. Finn lay on the floor with a blanket half kicked away. They had stayed the night, refusing to leave her alone. Manisa swung her feet to the floor and immediately felt nauseous. Her body felt decanted, as if parts of her had been poured out when the keeper released her. She felt those missing pieces so strongly. Manisa swallowed. It was barely light out when the two friends ventured into the woods where Manisa had first disappeared. The landscape felt both familiar and foreign. As they traveled, something shifted. The trees were completely silent. The air was eerily still. Light filtered down, but it was flat and bright, exposing them more than they liked. Manisa felt a surge of fear, but Arya saw that she repressed the panic and held her hand, grounding her. You are strong enough to do this, she reminded softly. You have faced all of this already. Manisa stood tall, showing courage in the face of terror, and they walked together. It felt strange, walking towards a place that was seeking to trap her, that had taken so much from her. They reached a clearing by a river. A memory jolted Manisa to a halt. The air shifted again. Not dramatically, it was as if they had entered an alternative version of the forest, or a cleverly mimicked version of one. Between two trees that leaned close together, there was a seam, barely visible. Arya stepped closer, and she reached forward. The door was there. Small, brass-handled, simple. They pulled the sacks off their backs and opened them to start the process. But the bags were both empty. They hadn't felt the weight change, but everything was gone. Arya grabbed Manifa's hand. We are already here, she said, and you know this place. You know its rules. Clearly it knows we're here. What do you think we should do? Manisa swallowed hard, her mouth dry. I think We need to go in. With her hands sweaty and cold, she grabbed the handle and opened the door. The stairs were the same. The bulb threw light down towards them through the dark. But as they descended the stairs, Manifa's eyes grew wide. The shelves. The shelves were emptier. Where once thousands of bottles had stood, there were now gaps, dust outlines where glass had been. A draft moved through the cellar like a sigh. The keeper stood at the far end, waiting. He looked exactly as he had before. Silver hair, polished eyes. "Ah, you returned," he observed. "With a witness," Arya said firmly. The keeper's gaze slid across them, assessing, weighing. "Your batch was unsuccessful," he told Manifa calmly. "You were returned." "I am not inventory," Manifa said, although her voice wavered. "And you have been watching me." "True," the keeper agreed. "You have potential." The keeper tilted his head. "Everyone ages. I just simply expedite the process." Arya's hand clenched. "You trap people. I preserve them," the keeper corrected. "Left unattended, most people sour on their own." There is something that Manifa did not confess to Arya and Finn. Inside the bottle, there had been times when she was happy to be trapped. Moments when she thought, yes, I am too angry and too hurt and too weak. Moments when she felt protected. And that was the most dangerous part, not the glass, not the cork, the safety from life. Standing in the cellar now, Manifa felt those old thoughts rise again like sediment disturbed. The keeper watched her closely. "You see," the keeper said softly, "I was only trying to keep you safe after what happened in your world. You looked for me. That's why you were able to find me." "She understands she was hurt," Arya said, "but you didn't need to trap her." The keeper smiled. "You are such an angry little thing," he replied, a hungry look in his eyes, assessing her worth. "I have good reason to be," Arya shot back. "Well, you do have some spice to you," he said, moving closer. Manifa stepped back, looking for something to attack him with. She stumbled and fell into one of the shelves. The shelves trembled. A bottle somewhere fell into the darkness and shattered. A sound cracked through the room like a starting pistol. From the far corners of the cellar came whispers, and not voices exactly, more like breaths escaping. The keeper's composure flickered. "Control yourselves," he snapped at the bottles. Manifa straightened up and looked at the gaps in the rows, the dust outlines, at the faint glow still pulsing inside the remaining bottles. "You don't get to keep them." She bit her words, feeling like a feral cat protecting her young. The keeper's eyes hardened. Manifa walked towards him on the prowl, a vicious glint in her eyes. She did not know what she intended to do. She only knew that she could not leave the cellar intact. She picked up a bottle from the nearest shelf. Inside, something faintly luminous flickered. The keeper lunged. Too late. Arya elbowed him hard in the stomach, sending his small frame to the ground. Manifa smashed the bottle against the wall and glass exploded. A flash of light swirled around the cellar as if confused by the sudden grace of space, and then it shot upward through the door. The keeper staggered back. "You will ruin them," he cried. "No," Arya said quietly. "She's freeing them." Manifa grabbed another bottle. Arya grabbed one too. One by one, they shattered the glass. The cellar filled with the sound of breaking, of release of something long compressed, finally expanding. And the keeper shrank. "You misunderstand," the keeper said, his voice cracking for the first time. "Well, without containment, they will curdle. They will collapse under their own immaturity. You collect potential because you're afraid of watching it fail. Nifa felt so much pent-up anger bursting through, and she was trying to press it down. I felt alone and broken, but I am not that girl anymore. I made it home, and I refuse to let you control me. You cannot trap me in fear. And every creature here deserves a chance to heal, and you don't let that happen. The keeper said nothing. You'd rather store people than see them make mistakes. The last of the bottles shattered. The shelves stood bare. The keeper's suit dulled. His silver hair lost its polish. You cannot undo what aging does, he said quietly. No, Manifa agreed, but you can't force it either. The keeper blinked and then dissolved into the air, leaving behind only a faint echo of disbelief. The bulb flickered out, and the two of them stood at the base of the stairs that now led to nothing. Time to go, Arya said gently. They climbed the stairs toward the trail of light. Reaching the top and stepping out into the forest, they breathed the air and hugged each other tightly. Parting, Manifa wrapped her fingers around the doorknob and pushed the wooden door closed. Manifa hesitated a moment, and then she pressed her palm against the wood. The seam sealed, and the door vanished. They walked back through the forest, re-entering their world of sound and the movement of the air. Neither of them spoke at first. Arya looked at her friend. How do you feel? She considered it. Tired, she admitted, but free. And that, perhaps, was enough. Manifa returned to regular life slowly, to routine, to conversation. She was not cured of anger. She was not polished into perfection, and sometimes she still dreamed of her glass world. She shared her story, encouraging others to speak up about their struggles, and the gatherings became a safe haven where people could connect, find understanding, and work through their fears together. There were so many mysteries in the world, and not everything could be easily understood. There was real danger out there, both mythological and human. She knew something the keeper never understood. A life, however messy, deepens in motion. So yes, a girl once returned on the day of her own funeral, thought to be a ghost. She had come home feverish and afraid and barely alive. But with a little patience and a lot of understanding, she walked into her own unfinished story and mastered it, saving many others in the process. And to this day, that particular door with the brass handle has never reappeared.